But I loved it, loved sales. What I really loved about it, though, was the personal development aspect, which I was now being introduced to because in their books, and then, I was getting more books and more. Back then it was tapes, cassette tape programs. I mean, that.
Welcome back, our listeners, to Courage, Confidence, and Connections podcast. I'm Janice Devo, your host, and I have an awesome guest with me today. Surprise, Bob Burg is with me. He's the co-author of the international bestseller, The Go-Giver series, which is there's 4 books. I was just telling him I bought all 4 and I highly recommend it. Welcome, Bob.
Hi, Janice. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I've been so excited about this, and you've been very patient to get you on my schedule and get to talking about it. So, a couple questions. Where do you reside from? What part of the world? Are you in Canada?
No, I'm in Jupiter, Florida, which is a suburb of a northern suburb of West Palm Beach, about 25 minutes north on the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh, okay. Okay, great, great. Well, I always like my audience to have a little history on all of my guests because there's always a backstory. And your
Sure.
book, of course, we'll be talking about your book, but I like the backstories. I like to know how people got from, A to Z, and what is a little bit of your history and background that kind of propelled you into this direction.
I began in sales after a very short, about a 2-year career as a broadcaster. First on radio doing sports and then television doing news. But I really wasn't very good at it. And I got into sales as one of those things that you do when you don't have a job.
Yeah.
And yeah, and knew nothing about it, had never had any formal sales training. So I stumbled, for the first, few months or so. I went into a bookstore one day, and this is got to be 40 years ago now. And I wasn't sure what I was looking for because back then you didn't know about things like sales books or personal development. Unless you knew, you just didn't know. Not everybody knew like they do today. But I was looking for something because I knew that on my own I was just not making it. And I saw 2 books. One was by Zig Ziglar, the other by Tom Hopkins, two of the icons, if you will, in the sales space. And I picked up those books, and I like to say to people, I didn't read them, I devoured them. And I just absolutely studied every night after work until the wee hours of the morning, and I would practice and drill and highlight and underline and the whole thing. And really, within a few weeks, Janice, my sales began to go through the roof. And it's not that there was a big difference between me 3 weeks earlier, but I now had a methodology to work from,
Okay.
right? A system, if you will. And I personally define a system as the process of predictably achieving a goal
Hmm.
based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles, the key being predictability. If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired results of B, then you know that all you need to do is A and continue to do A, and you'll get the desired results of B. So that was very affirming to me because now there was that system. And and I just really got into it. I loved it, loved sales. What I really loved about it, though, was the personal development aspect, which I was now being introduced to because in their books, and then, I was getting more books and more. Back then it was tapes, cassette tape programs. I mean, that's how long ago this was. They'd always say, you got to read books like How to Win Friends and Influence People and The Magic of Thinking Big and
Yeah.
Psycho-Cybernetics and, The Richest Man in Babylon and The Greatest Salesman in the World, all these classics of the person. And now I'm getting really fed because I was not a good student in school. So now I'm getting really fed with this great wisdom.
Hmm.
And I'm seeing that success is really, it's an inside job because sure, it manifests itself outwardly, but it begins in here, in the head, and then in the heart.
Hmm.
And you've got to become that person. And so it was just a great experience. So I loved sales. I went to a couple different companies, was sales manager of one eventually, and then I started being asked to share with other sales teams how to do what was working for me. And as they say on the old Seinfeld show, yada yada yada. Here we are now today.
Right. Right, exactly. Well, you have such a wonderful twist on the sales arena. I also came up in sales arena, and I was taught by it through Dale Carnegie and Brian
Ooh, the best.
Tracy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Brian Tracy,
hmm
hero of mine. Yeah.
Yeah. However, a lot of them did not really resonate with me because it
Ah,
was more, wasn't my personality, and I
sure.
am very, very
I hear you.
relational. So your book speaks directly to people who need to, I want to say if they don't have a personality, maybe they need to get one. Um, but on a note of being relational, a lot of the books that you're talking about, did they really teach you about being relational in the sales arena? Because that's what worked for me.
Here's, I think, a wonderful point that you bring up, and that is you learn from everyone,
hmm
but you apply it to your unique personality and just basic ways of doing things, your values, your right, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
So you can take, yeah, so you can read all sorts of great books and listen to all sorts of great audios and videos and see wonderful speakers and the training from your wherever you work, whatever, and you take in the principle of what works,
hmm
but then you gear it to yourself, your style, your personality, your ethic, your, you know what I'm saying?
I do. I do. And I totally agree. Like I said before we started recording, that what transitioned my career and like you mentioned, just shot it through the roof was relationship selling because I
Jim
related
Cathcart,
to
yeah,
that.
and Tony
And
Alessander, yeah.
yeah, one of my clients was a car dealer, one of my customers' clients at the time, and they kept trying to hire me, but all their sales methods were the old traditional, um, competitive, lower the price, all that stuff, and I couldn't resonate with it. Now, we have people listening to this that are probably not in sales, but they deal with people at some level. So, how do people relate to the go giver when they're not entrepreneurs or in the sales arena? What would you say to those people?
Well, a big part of the go-giver methodology, if you will, concept is that your focus is on providing immense value to others. Okay, now this is not in a martyrish, self-sacrificial way, not at all. It's understanding that to the degree you can take your focus off yourself and place it on serving others, discovering their needs, their wants, desires, focusing on helping them to solve their problems, right? Helping to move them closer to happiness. That's the degree that people relate to you. People they know you, they like you, they trust you, they want to do business with you, they want to tell the world about you. Now, this works just as well in for people within a corporate environment as
Mhm.
it does for people who are entrepreneurial and sales. You know, when I used to speak at sales conferences, one of the things I would first say is nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet,
No,
right?
no.
Right? They're not going to buy from you because you need the money, and they're not going to buy from you because just because you're a nice person. Why are they going to buy from you? Because they believe that they'll be better off by doing so than by not doing so. Well, it's the same with an employee. Okay. Nobody's going to hire you and continue to pay you a salary because you have a mortgage payment to meet or because you want to send your kid to a good school or because you have, right? They're going to do so because you're providing sufficient value, hopefully exceptional value to them that causes them to understand that keeping you on, paying you more, promoting you when appropriate, and so forth, is what's going to be in their best interest as well. So
Yeah,
that's really what, whether you're an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, right? An entrepreneur within, you're always having to please the customer. It's just that the customer might be your boss, the customer might be your supervisor or your team members or that person in the silo two doors down, right? You just, yeah.
right. Yeah, absolutely. So, what part of the world did you grow up in? Did that influence where you've landed today?
So I grew up in Massachusetts. Yeah, and I would say I got down here to Florida as fast as I could. And it's nothing against the people in Massachusetts, fine people, but the weather is not my style.
Oh,
So, Yeah, so but yeah, I was very fortunate to have great parents who really embodied to me, what I would call the go-giver spirit
Okay.
in the way they did things. And so I got to learn by great example.
Oh, that's fantastic. And did you have any particular have or hobbies and friends that also, did you have a lot of friends because you embodied that from your parents? Were you?
Um, Yeah, I mean to a certain point, but I also had my own personal issues that I think sometimes made it difficult for me to be able to get along with people and sustain friendships and relationships past a certain point too. So there was a lot of growth I had to do personally along the way.
Yeah, don't we all? I mean, it's always it's a journey. Life is a journey, and we're never going to arrive at the
No,
perfection spot. Even
that's
those,
true.
yeah, even those of us who are recovering perfectionists. Now, as the title of my podcast is Courage, Confidence, and Connections, I'm curious where courage might have come into play in your life and business. I mean, did it take courage to do anything in particular that has been significant in your life?
I think pretty much any time that you do anything of significance, it takes some courage.
Hmm.
Um, my dad always used to, ask a question. He'd say, "Who is brave?" And the answer was that person who is smart enough to be afraid and still do their job, right? So, courage is probably, and we've all heard this before, not something I made up, but it's not the absence of fear. It's working effectively within that fear. And so, yeah, I mean, I think anything significant takes some courage and knowing that you're going to get, knocked in your rear end at times.
Absolutely. And as you embrace courage, you do build your confidence as,
Well, that
as it were.
that's the thing.
Hmm.
And that's the next part. And I love how you segue into that because it's so true. And that confidence, and that's why that it's really, I think, a matter of building on your small successes as opposed to thinking, well, you've got to operate so far out of your comfort zone that you're not going to take action. And there's a time and place for it, don't get me wrong, a time and place for jumping outside the comfort zone, but I
Right.
think a lot of times we're better off taking those small steps
Hmm.
and hitting those small successes, and with each of those small successes we're actually expanding our comfort zone,
Yes.
right? And that gives us confidence because we know, well, we could do this. Could I do this? Well,
Yeah.
yes, that,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah, and
And
and that's
always being able to reflect back on what we have had success with
sure.
is profound. Now, you have a co-author on that book series, and
Hmm.
let's talk about connections. Now, there are 5 laws in the books, and I would love you if you would elaborate on those 5 laws that you and is it John?
Yeah, John David Mann, and I'll tell you that came up with the third one, connections. You see, your calling card is courage, confidence, and connections, right? Well, with John, I met John because I was writing a monthly column for a magazine, and he was the editor in chief.
Oh,
And yeah, and over the course of a year or so, we got to know each other. And you've heard me say it, I've written it from my earliest books, Endless Referrals, and it made its way into The Go-Giver. What I call the golden rule of business, of sales, of networking, what have you, is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust.
right.
Well, when I brought the idea to John about this, about the Go Giver, and I asked John to be the lead writer and storyteller. I mean, he was the guy who made this really come alive. He's a magnificent writer. I'm a how-to guy. I'm step by, I'm step one, step two, step three. I'm the boring guy. John, even back then, had a reputation as a magnificent writer, and so I approached him with this. And he's also a guy, he's a great guy, a man of very high integrity. And so he was the only one I wanted to do this with. And I asked him if he would, take a look at it. And he tells the story that, he went back to his back then fiance, now wife, Anna, and he said, I really don't have time to do this or to even really take a look at it. But it's Bob, how can I just at least not take? Now that's where the relationship comes in, right?
Hmm.
That's the connection part.
Yep.
If John and I didn't have that connection, not just knowing each other, but having that know, like, and trust relationship, he wouldn't have taken a look at it. Not because he's a bad guy, but because he was doing his own thing, and you just can't take everything on. So he at least, wanted to look. So he and Anna were visiting her mom in on the Gulf Coast of Florida, where she had a place, and they took a 4-hour drive over to Jupiter, Florida, where I live, and we had about a 3-hour dinner, discussed the idea of the book. And even then, it was 3 weeks later till John called me back and said, we've discussed this and we think it's a good idea. Let's do this.
Oh,
That's how, yeah. And then, and so this never would have happened other than having that real connection with another human being.
you were in the right place at the right time. So, what
Yeah.
about those five
So
laws that
let's, yeah,
you guys wrote about? Can we discuss that a little bit?
sure. So the laws themselves are the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity.
Okay.
Now, yeah, law number one, says that your true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment. Now, this can be easily misconstrued, right? Because give more in value than you take in payment, isn't that going to send you into bankruptcy, right? So we need to understand the difference between price and value. Price is a dollar figure; it's a dollar amount. Value is the relative worth or uh, desirability of a thing, of something to
Hmm.
the end user or beholder. What is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea, what have you, that
Right.
brings so much worth to another person that
Hmm.
they will willingly exchange their money for it while you make a very healthy profit? So in a free market based exchange, right, where no one's forced to do business with anyone else, they do so on their own volition. There should always be two profits: the buyer profits and the seller profits, because each of them come away better off afterwards than they were beforehand.
Yeah, that is fantastic. Authenticity is my one of my favorite words. It's
Well,
just, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, it speaks to character and, what a person brings to the table. When I was in sales, I had one client that, I mean, I had several. I had some really big ones too. But what I brought to the table was me, and that is part of the value. And
Uh,
being authentic and customer service is huge. That's a big pet peeve of mine is good customer service. I want, you know,
Yeah, and it's interesting. As a friend of mine, Richard Wildman says, and Richard is one of the best in the world when it comes to the customer experience. He says, and he wrote a fantastic book called 100 Proven Ways to Acquire and Keep Clients for Life. And what he says is customer service, that's the baseline at this point, right? I mean, that's just expected. If you don't have that, that's it. But it's the actual experience you bring to that other person, right?
right.
And I think that goes back to the law of value as well, because it's the whole thing. It's not the price of the dinner at the restaurant you own. It's how do you make your patrons feel,
Right.
experience, right? And so, yeah, whatever they pay, they should feel as though they receive lots more in terms of the overall experience and the value they received, while of course, you'd make a profit.
Exactly. And I think one thing that can be misconstrued if people don't really understand your philosophy is it's I'm gonna have to give something away. I'm gonna lose money in this process versus I'm going to be more successful. Now I'm curious because in reading the book you use the realtor, the real estate scenario.
Hmm.
Why did you pick the real estate scenario? I was curious. There's so many different options. What was your motivation to use a realtor?
John and I have both had a lot of real estate company clients,
Oh,
in our career. So it was one we understood, and we had we had others as well. We had the insurance, the insurance person both do a lot, in terms of insurance, financial services, and things, and so it was kind of easy to go there. But really, the principles themselves apply, you know, pretty much to any business, right? You've got to do those 5 things. You've got to be able to again focus on providing immense value. You've got to, with law number 2, compensation, it's a matter of how many lives can you impact with
oh,
that exceptional value. With
yes.
law number 3, the law of influence, and we talk about placing the other person's interest first. Again, not in a self-sacrificial way, but in a way that builds everyone along the way. But it's got to be about them because, again, they're buying for their reason. Authenticity, which you talked about, so important. And then, of course, receptivity, the fifth law. We've got to be able to breathe in as well as breathe out. Right? It's not one or the other. So they really work harmoniously.
Right, right. How did you come up with the title? Because I think I was telling somebody about the book sometime back, and they mistook it for the Go-Getter, and I'm like,
Go
no,
get
no,
it.
no, it's the Go-Giver. So I'm curious about the title because I've wondered about that ever since I read it.
Yeah. So, and there is, by the way, a book called The Go-Getter, which was written about 50 or 60, 70 years ago by a gentleman by the name of Peter Kyne, Kyne, and it's a brilliant book. It's a wonderful book. And by the way, unlike what many people think, the opposite of a go-giver is not a go-getter. The opposite of a go-giver is a go-taker, right? So we love go-getters, right? Because go-getters take action. And as you know, you can have the nicest thoughts, best ideas, greatest intent, but without action being put in there, nothing's going to happen. Anyway, so excuse me. So the title was kind of inspired by a my first book, which was called Endless Referrals,
Okay.
and it was really all about it was really a system, if you will, for entrepreneurs and salespeople who didn't feel comfortable or confident going out into their local communities and building those kinds of relationships, right? As we were talking about earlier, that resulted in people doing business with them directly and or referring them to others. So it was, how can you confidently go out there and build these? And really, what you do is you focus on giving value to others from the moment you meet people, whether it's that initial contact through the follow up and follow through, the relationship building process, the sales process, referral process. You're always focused on giving value to
Mhm.
others. So we came up with the go giver. And, there is that natural connection in one's mind to go getter.
Yeah.
So this was a little bit of a pattern interrupt. So instead of go getter, go giver, even though again the two are complementary as opposed to opposite.
Yeah, I just think it's brilliant. I don't even recall how I found that book, but I would like you to touch on the other three um, books in the series, and let's just tell our audience a little bit about each of them and how they complement each other.
Well, the second book is Go Givers Sell More, and that's the only one in the series that is not a parable. So that is more of a application guide, if you will, to the original Go Giver.
Okay.
Then you've got the second parable in the series, the third book, the Go Giver Leader, and this is just because there were so many people who asked, so how does a go giver go from entrepreneurship and salesmanship to leadership, right? And so we built a story around that. And then and again, it's all about the people you lead, right? It's not about the leader, it's about the people the leader leads and
Yes.
how they build those people. They create that context for those they lead to be successful. And then the third parable, fourth book in the series, is The Go Giver Influencer. This is probably my favorite book in the series because it's all about people skills.
Okay.
And it features a gentleman by the name of Jillian and a gentleman by the name of Jackson and a woman by the name of Jillian. And they at first have a sort of an antagonistic business relationship, even though they both have what the other needs. They
Mhm.
can't get past their own biases and their own way of seeing the world, and they're outright. And finally, through two different mentors, so they're now two mentors and two proteges in that one. Again, that's John's brilliant writing and storytelling.
Great.
And at the end, they're able to come together and put together a great business deal and so forth. And but it's really people skills. And then there's a fourth parable or fifth book, but this was written by John and his now wife for the last, I think, 20 years or whatever it is, however long the book's been out, because they got married shortly after the book was published. But John and his wife Anna Gabriel Mann, and they call it the Go Giver Marriage. and they
Oh,
took the principles from the Go Giver, and and of course Anna's background is in marriage therapy, counseling, and so forth. And then you've got John, who's such a great writer, so they did sort of half parable, half how to.
wow, I must have been intuitive on that because that was going to be my next question was how because I see how the principles apply to relationships of all
Sure,
kinds.
sure.
And while I was getting ready to mention that, I had no idea about that book. So that is really, really wonderful. Because the principles apply regardless across the board to
Sure.
all types, families and such. And I'm
Hmm.
being very relational. I'm going to read The Influencer next.
Oh, thank you. I hope you enjoy
Oh,
it.
well, I know I will. Now, how did he come up, or did you guys come up with the parable idea? Because that really is a brilliant way for somebody to get the point, so to speak.
Thank you. Well, coming up with the idea is the easy part. To do a parable, I just said, I'd like to do a parable, and I wonder if John David Mann could, and yeah, I'd always read, parables since I'd been in sales. Aside from the how to books I'd read, I often read business parables and really enjoyed them. And I think all of it, we all know that parables, which are stories, they connect on a deeper level, right? On kind of more of a heart level. And so when you can take the basic principles and put them into story form, they're easier for people to take in and really absorb. And I thought, that I'd love to take that uh, the premise of the know, like, and trust, and the relationship building, and all those things that you and I both see as a very viable way of selling and doing business, and
Mhm.
put that into a business parable. But it was after I started to work with John as the a columnist for the magazine, that then I said, yeah, John's the guy I want to have do this.
Oh, that's great. I want to honor your time. Like I said, we record for about a half hour, and so our audience, I always want my guests to wrap it up with any advice, thoughts, wisdom, whatever you want to share for the next couple of minutes to tie into our discussion or whatever your heart's desire is.
Well, I remember a couple of years after being in sales, and I went to another company, and I was in a real sales slump. And I made a young salesperson's mistake in that, in trying to get out of the slump, I was focused on myself and getting out of the slump rather than being focused on the customer, which is where I should have been focused. And one day there was a guy at the company where I worked. He was not in sales. He was an older guy. I think he worked in the engineering department, and that he soon retired. But he was one of these guys who, he didn't say much, but whenever he did say something, it was usually pretty profound. And I think he kind of just saw something in me where, he saw me as that, like Joe in the story, right? He saw me as that kind of young, up and coming, ambitious, aggressive, but good guy, but whose focus was not in the right place. And he took me aside and he said, Berg, can I give you some advice? And I said, yeah, please do. I need it. And he said, if you want to make a lot of, I'll never forget this. He said, if you want to make a lot of money in sales, he said, don't have making money as your target. Your target is serving others. Now, when you hit the target, he said, you'll get a reward, and that reward will come in the form of money.
Mhm.
And you can do with that money whatever you choose. But never forget, he said, the money is simply the reward for hitting the target. It's
Yes,
not the target itself.
right.
And I think when we can keep that in mind, we're really 9 steps ahead of the game in a 10-step game.
Absolutely, and that attributes to a lot of people's success when they have more concern. That's one of my big things that I teach clients because I'm a coach as well, is to focus on the other person
Hmm.
and being single, I've dated a little bit. Well, don't recommend it. But anyway, I had a conversation with one individual that all they did was talk about themselves. I did not get asked one question.
Wow.
And so I was like, well, there we go. That one's off the shelf altogether. So
Yeah.
so people we do like to talk about ourselves. However, when you show interest in the other person, professionally or personally, it always comes back as a benefit. It always serves to make a good relationship. But, human nature is it's all about me.
Yeah, well, it very much is.
Yeah.
And when we honor that and approach it that way, then we find ourselves really in a good position. I always say when I first started in sales too, I did a lot of telephone prospecting,
Hmm.
and I like to say nobody ever hung up the phone on me while they were talking.
No, they don't. I like that a lot. I really, really do. And so this has just been fantastic. I think we're about at our 30-minute mark here to honor your time and our listeners. There has been a lot of wisdom put out here. So I hope our audience grabs hold, gets all the books, and like I said, I'm going straight for the influencer next time. That speaks to me pretty loud.
I appreciate you having me on your show, and you do such a wonderful job and bring so much value to so many people. Your clients are very fortunate to have you working with them. So thank you for all you do.
Well, thank you, Bob. This has been delightful, and we're wrapping up another episode of Courage, Confidence, and Connections. This is the last one in this season, so you have been the icing on the cake.
I'm honored. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to our listeners, and tune in for the next episode starting season 2.